How's it going, everyone? I wanted to make a short video on game development tips, as that was one of the requests on the YouTube post that I created. So here goes nothing. I'd say about 10 or so tips for game development. Now, note that this will change depending on if this is a volunteer-based project, this is a paid gig, right? But I've learned in my years of experience running fan projects or mods, but also working on an actual game, that there are some differences, but there are also some general principles that apply across the board. So whether you're working on your own little pet project or you're thinking about actually joining or creating a full dev team for a game, these should apply. The first one is have a strong vision. There's going to be some crossover with the team dynamics things that I've talked about before. I have a 10 commandments of team dynamics presentation where I talk about the 10 important things for assembling and running a good team. These things will be more focused on game dev, but there'll be some crossover like this one. If you have an idea for a game, make sure it's a really strong vision that matches something that you're really excited about, and that way, if there's ever a question about where the direction of the game should go, you have that vision to strive towards no matter what. Number two is assembling a trustworthy, like-minded team. So obviously you want to fill in the gaps where you might not have the expertise, or if you're running into issues of bandwidth and you can only do so much, having more people to help you out is great. But you also want them to be like-minded and trustworthy. They need to share your vision essentially from step one, and they need to be trustworthy. If you can't trust them, then you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble, more work than it's worth, and potentially the entire project could be in jeopardy. Number three is to communicate effectively within the team. This is absolutely vital, especially if you're a remote team and you're working in different countries or different parts of the country. And if you don't have good communication, you can't work together and get things done. Number four is to be relentlessly organized and maintain version-controlled source code. And this only works if everyone is working on the same code base. If you start having exceptions and onesie twosies and we're bringing in this person, but they're going to get a copy and work on this copy, you're going to run into version control issues and it's going to be a disaster. So get over that initial barrier of getting everyone on the same source code, and then do not move from that. Stay on that source code. Make sure everyone's contributing through the proper channels. Number five is to keep team meetings succinct with specific action items and next steps. So obviously, team meetings are bound to happen. You can't avoid them. However, what you want to do is make sure that there's a deliberate purpose to each meeting, there's a process you go through, and a payoff. Then there's the 3 Ps. And if you have next steps, they should absolutely be bound to deadlines where you can reach out to that person and work on the next step. If you don't do that, meetings are a colossal waste of time, and you don't want to be wasting anyone's time. Number 6 is to test more than you think you need to. One of the craziest things that I've witnessed in mods that I've observed or projects that I've been aware of is a dev will make a change and then just push it live. They will not go through any kind of testing, although they'll do some really quick testing on their end and then push it out there. Because of the way development and game development works, there's a ripple effect. If you change one thing, you might have this idea that only affects a certain, aspect or section of your game, where in reality it could affect a lot of different areas of your game or your mod. So you want to test thoroughly. Often you want to have a procedure that's not over encumbering to the point where it's completely inefficient and it pushes things out for weeks or anything like that. But you do want some kind of standard operating procedure to make sure that your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. Number 7 is user experience polish creates the perception of how fun your game is. Your game might have incredible mechanics, it might be really fun on its own, but if there's not a certain level of polish when it comes to the sound design, the music design, the visual design, the user experience of how the game feels, there's going to be a perception that your game is either low quality, unfinished, buggy, or even diminishing the fun of the game itself. Even though it's not necessarily rational to think that way. You could have a really fun game and kind of a buggy menu, and the buggy menu shouldn't get in the way of how fun the game is, but it still will, because users are constantly surrounded by excellent experiences, whether it's their mobile device, whether it's their home computer, their gaming setup. Most of the games they've played have excellent user experiences. And so if you want to compete, consider really refining what you have. Instead of adding more features, refine what you have before you add something else. That's what I would say. Obviously, it depends on the size of the team. the capabilities that you have, and a lot of other factors. But in general, I would say to err on the side of polish over adding more features. Number 8 is just this general note that game development is a lot of work. You might think that it's all sunshine and roses, but in reality, any game dev will tell you, anyone that's worked in the industry will tell you, it is massive amounts of work. Every industry has its quirks, but with game development, you are, you know, doing all kinds of different work. You're creating music, you're creating visuals, you're creating logic and programming, and you're mashing them all together in a way that a user interacts with it. And so the number of variables involved are astronomical. So with that being said, there's a lot that goes into games, and it's a very competitive market. Number 9 is recognize your key players on the development team and do not take them for granted. This is absolutely vital. You might have a great team. Let's say you applied step 1, you got a great vision. You got step 2, you have a like-minded, trustworthy team, but you don't treat your team well, or you don't treat certain key members really well. You want to make sure that you do that because your game dev team is going to go through a lot with you, and so you want to make sure that you are communicating to them that they are valued and that you value them. The last one is more of a specific Steam recommendation and tip. If your game is on Steam, know this: if you're in early access and people are leave reviews for you, by the time you launch your full game, those reviews will not count towards your review count in terms of your rating. So if you're familiar with Steam, it'll have very positive, overwhelmingly positive, negative, mixed, these ratings. Well, that's obviously very key to Steam recommending you in their algorithm, to being discovered in general, and just a general perception that your game is good or not. So unfortunately, if you release in early access, know that all that work you're doing towards getting reviews is nice in the short term, but long term, those reviews won't count. That also goes for if you distribute your game via keys. So for example, at Smack Studio, when we ran our Kickstarter, we talked with Valve, and they were fine with us distributing keys in exchange for Kickstarter tiers. And so really, people weren't getting the game for free. We were charging them for a certain amount and then giving them a key with that. But the problem is, whenever they leave a review, it says free product next to their review, and again, does not count towards that total count. Unfortunately, if either this documentation was better known or they were more forthright with us, we may have considered a different strategy. So keep all that in mind. These are things that nobody told me about, and so things that I learned along the way. Hopefully it helps you out if you're an aspiring game dev. And anyway, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I hope you got value out of it. I'll catch you guys on the next video.